All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Thursday, July 17th of 2025, and the British Open is in full swing here, so good luck to all of you playing some golf this weekend. We do have round two showdown later tonight or early tomorrow morning, depending on where you live. But aside from that, not a ton else going on today. It's kind of a quiet day. MLB second half of the season does return tomorrow. So nice little quiet day before things ramp back up. But for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all TFS related questions, get your questions in. One of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim teams. Can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then we do this show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So tune in any one of those days, get your questions answered. Let's get SaberSim up on the screen here, and we will jump into questions here. So we did have one question come in prior to the show, and that question came in from Bill's Nut. First question, I believe Bill's Nut. Let me double check that. Yep. All right. First question. So should I be looking for contests where players have higher sim ROIs in contest flashback to find contests that are more beatable? This is a follow-up to my question yesterday. Thanks. Yeah, this is honestly, I know I saw Jordan responded as well. He said he's going to be coming out with a video. I think that's a great idea. That's what we talked about yesterday. Basically what I would do is I would be like, okay, I'm going to look at the contests under $3 and I'm going to check these out. And then I'm going to figure out, are there any contests under $3 where maybe I should avoid, or maybe my dollars are better spent somewhere else? And then play the good ones and then take the rest of your bankroll. What I recommend personally is I recommend switching sites rather than going up and down the lobby. Or if you don't want to switch sites, you can also check out alternate slates too. I'd say, I take an approach of don't go up and down the lobby, go outward, which is additional slates, right? So what that would look like. And I don't know if some of this stuff is up right now. We can go back actually. Let's just go back to last week. Okay. So what I would do, right, is okay, let's say I played the good contests for the main slate. Okay, well then, maybe I have some bankroll left because I avoided some contests that I used to play but don't play anymore. What do I do with that? Do you go and play the higher stake stuff, above $3? For me, no, right? I would have went and played the turbo. I would have went and played the night. I would have went and played the late night. These are, 3 additional classic slates that you can get action to, and they're going to have low stakes contests, right? So then you go and you play those. Okay, well, what if I play those? All right, then instead of, going to the higher, not main slates, but they have 3 classic slates that you can play. Again, they're going to have low stakes contests, right? This is kind of where you get into high volume type stuff. You're hey, Andrew, maybe I live in Oregon, I can only play on FanDuel. Okay, well then do the approach for FanDuel. Play the main, the express, the after hours. If you want, mess around with some of the single game stuff. Single game's a little bit different. Maybe you're not so used to it. You're I'd rather stick with, classics. Okay, then you go, higher up in the lobby in stakes, right? So that's the progression that I've been using for a while, and something that I'll recommend to people is go more slates, go more sites before you go up in stakes. So I think that, when you do it, you can actually get a lot of action down. I've seen, at least when I'm done it, I think I did the numbers for NBA, you can get 1,500 in low stakes action across all sites. And like FanDuel, DraftKings. Maybe you start to mix in like some Yahoo and Owner Box. They don't have like specific low stakes, but sharks tend to stay away from there a little bit more. So there's a lot of opportunities here to get your money in good, right? That is always the goal. Get your money in as good as you can and try and avoid the hardest games. So that's something I always think about. I'll say this from time to time in case you haven't heard it. WSOP main event just ended, right? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, you could be the 10th best poker player in the world, but if you're at the table with the other 9, you're now the worst player in the game, right? So you always want to find the best games possible. Okay. Snowman said, good morning. What is going on? That was our only question here. And really interesting, right? There's actually nothing to like build for yet. Round 1 golf is still in progress. Can't really build for round 2. MLB projection. Like as we go into the second half of the MLB season, maybe you've been struggling, right? Maybe you haven't had like a positive year and you really want to turn it around and you're, about to like lock in and get ready for the second half of the season, right? So that's kind of the approach I'm taking here. Now, what I would do is I would have spent some time studying winning players, right? So, okay, so let's say we go back to Sunday, right? That was the last day for MLB. Okay, well, I'm going to go to the Sunday MLB main slate. Looks like it was a nice big slate. Let this load. All right, so what I would probably do is like start with studying. Let's say, if you are somebody who's like mass multi-entering, right? You're playing 20 maxes, 150 maxes. Then what I would do is like look at like the biggest 150 max in the lobby, right? If you're somebody playing like single entry 3 max, I would probably look at like the high stakes contest, So like if your contests that you play on general have less entries, study contests with the lower max, and then if you have play contests with more entries, study the bigger contests, right? So like I'm gonna go look at the 150 max. All right. So we come into the 150 max. The reason we're studying this contest, right, is because it takes a lot of money to max this contest, right? You're gonna have 150 times what, 18? What is that? Times 18. Costs about costs exactly $2,700 to max this contest. The players that are maxing this contest, right, are some of the best players in the lobby, probably long-time winners. And especially if they're ranking out well, they're obviously doing something right. So these are the players that we want to kind of focus on. Now, for maxers, I would just come in and then sort by sim ROI. And then I would want to study like just from the top down. You could even study names, right? Like, oh, I know that, Utica is like a really good DFS player, right? Okay, well then like you go and find him if he's on here and maybe he didn't like play this day, right? Okay. I know who like Hishbu is, right? So like maybe like jump a little bit and a lot of these are like name players if you're familiar with DFS, right? But I'm just going to start from the top down. All right, so Brontosaurus Flex, what I would do, right? Well, first thing I would probably do is like just look at some of the macro characteristics of these players like at the top before we kind of jump in here. So like what are they doing? Okay. Average salary 49.5, 49.7, 49.4, 49.8, 49.5, 49.8, 49.4. There is a 49 2, almost 49.3, 49.1, right? So there's a little bit of a range. Players aren't just jamming the highest salary lineups. That being said, the average is still like mostly in the 49Ks. This is normally like why I will bump up my min salary slightly. And it's like I see this, and so trying to like learn from it where I'm not going from like 48K to, 49.7 or anything crazy, but I am giving it like a little boost, up to 49,000, and let that kind of be my lower end here. So I bet you like some of these guys like Shady Advice and then Shady Nasty are probably both, maybe have like a couple lineups under 49K, but it doesn't look like it's probably like too many. So they feel like a little bit more of the exception than the rule, like just kind of based on what I'm seeing here. So this is why I like to increase min salary, right? This is something I can take away. Now, what else do I see? Okay, average dupes are all 0. Okay, so like not very important to consider duplication in these large MLB classic slates at all. That can change, right? Based on the sport. I've seen it where like 8-game college football main slate actually has like 8 dupes, 5 dupes. And it's like, whoa, like, do we really have this many dupes in college football? So sport context changes, right? Different sports play differently. It's not always a matter of how many games are on the slate. So I find that interesting. All right, keeping it going here, right? Next thing, looking at like projected score, basically, right? 99.8, 98, 100.3, 96.5. See another 96, 97, 97.5, right? So seems like there's like a range here, right? We're looking at like the top, 10 to 15 maxers, and we see as low as 96.93, and then we see as high as 100.38. So, this goes to say like, okay, you don't need to be the highest projected score. You don't need to have the highest projected score set of lineups, but you need to care about it, right? To some extent. Some of these like lower sim ROI sets, look at this one, 92.7, 94.4, 95.6, right? Some of them are higher, sure, but it seems like clear to me that having a decent projection does indeed matter, right? Or else like 3 out of the 4 lowest sets here are very low sim average score, right? So this would be like the 101 would be like the exception in the opposite sense, maybe like very cash type lineups or something like that. That's why it's like not grading out well, because it doesn't have that much upside, or like maybe they're not stacking enough or stuff like that. But in general, seeing like the super low sim average scores at the bottom makes sense to me. Tells me that, we need to be conscious of this, right? And then the salary generally helps. You see this guy like 48.7, like average, right? Probably just sacrificing like a little bit too much. Okay, so we're learning things about baseball, right? We're trying to figure out what the best players are doing. Now we can get even more granular. We can look at them individually, right? Okay, so I'm going to click on BroFlex here, and then I'm going to go to the projections tab. This is when you do this, you should see their actual lineups and the actual players they played, right? So like here I'm seeing 30% Gilbert, and like those are his exposures. The actual ownership for Gilbert was 22%. So what I'll do, right, is I'll pull over like exposure, leverage, actual ownership, so I can actually I can see like, hey, what did these guys come in at? How exposed were they? And then how much leverage did they end up with? So before getting like super granular, I'll step back. And, this is super interesting, right? Right out of the gate. 98% 5-2 stacks, and then like 3 total 5-3 stacks, right? How they get to this distribution, I don't know. But like, hey, some of the best players jamming 5-2s. Very, very interesting. Not that many game stacks. 24% max stack exposure. Because we saw so many 5-2s, right? When you see that, I think it's even more important to look at which teams are being 2 stacked and which teams are being 5 stacked. Looks like Cincinnati's the highest, Milwaukee, Minnesota, Miami, and very, very spread at the 2s. So I would also sort by projected runs. Like, okay, their highest exposed team was also the highest projected run team. The top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projected run teams all have double-digit stack exposure, and then 9 out of the top 10 do. Only the Mets are like low, and then they're very low on a lot of the lower projected run teams. They are taking some shots on them, right? We see like 1%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 4%, 5%, right? So this makes a lot of sense to me. Hey, let's get to more of the better projected run teams. Let's get to some of the lower projected run teams, not too much, but we don't want to forget about them, right? We don't want to ignore them. And then I would assume that a lot of these are coming like in the 2-stack area. And some of them are. Some of them are coming in the 5-stack, which is interesting, right? Interesting. So this is kind of cool, like to look at. So I would have thought probably like off the bat that a lot of the when I'm looking at all, right, against like something that I'm thinking about, when I look at all and I see, okay, a lot of these top projected run teams are the highest stacked, and then I look at the stack exposure, it's 5-2s mostly. I would have expected the higher projected run teams to be the 5-stacks and the lower projected run teams to be the 2-stacks. Kind of seems like it's the opposite. Seems like, you look at the 2-stacks and the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projected run teams are all 8.7% or above. But then if you go to 5-stacks, there is only one team above 8.7, right? It's only Cincinnati. The other ones are a little bit lower, 8%, 8%, 2.7, 8%. So getting to some of them, but actually getting to less 5-stacks of them than they are 2-stacks. They're getting more 2-stacks than 5-stacks of the top teams. Now we go and look at like the 2-stacks for the lower projected run teams. And there is, let's count these, like 1 lineup, 3 lineups, 5 lineups, 9 lineups, 13 lineups. I'm just going to do like 4.3 and below. There are 1, 3, 5, 9, 13 lineups, 2-stacks of 4.3 projected runs and below. Okay, then there are 1, 4, 5, 8, 12, 15, 19, 23. There are 28 stacks here. There are 28 lineups with a 5-stack of a team, 4.3 runs and below. That's really interesting to me. They are basically playing twice as many 5-stacks of the lower projected run teams than they are of playing those teams as 2-stacks. I think logic is to kind of like, okay, they're lower projected runs. Maybe 1 or 2 guys get there, right? Maybe they hit 2 solo home runs. Maybe one guy does good and like gets a couple stolen bases. One guy, hits a double and they get there a little bit. Kind of the opposite here, right? This is kind of telling me like, hey, they're basically betting that the higher projected run teams are more likely to do good, which makes sense. So you can probably more safely take 2 players from that team. And then they're getting very spread out on these lower projected run teams where when one of these teams goes off, they're probably going to be lower owned. And I'm basically betting on the instance where they far outseed their projection and they end up being like an optimal stack and like they end up being really, really good if you have multiple pieces of them, because it just compounds, right? You take like a 3% owned player and then another 3 and then another 3 and then another 3. If they all do good together, well, your lineup is like very, very unique. Not a lot of people are benefiting when they score. And that should give you like a much easier path to like the top of your contest, right? I think this is like super cool, this kind of approach of like, let's take lower projected run teams, probably lower owned. Let's get really spread out, but let's try and get to a lot of them. And then hopefully 1 of them or 2 of them do good. And then we have more shots than other people. And then we're still getting some exposure of the better teams, but we're just hoping that they don't do as good as they're projected to, right? This is really interesting, right? I think this is super cool. We're learning things about baseball. And then that's we're still like on the team level, right? We looked at stacks, we looked at team stacks. Okay. We're learning stuff. Okay, well let's get more granular now, right? Let's get into pitchers and batters. Okay, so we go to pitchers. I'm going to look at their exposure, right? Okay, very, very flat leverages, right? Compared to actual ownership here. Or actually, this is projected. I'm going to go to Flagship MME Live. This will show me the leverage. Compared to like what the ownership for this contest is, which I don't know why these two numbers are different. I'm going to have to look at that, but we'll figure it out later. All right. So projected own, still super flat, like plus 7%, minus 7% are like the highest that I see here, right? So the way I would probably look at this would be to sort by ownership. I would actually probably sort by projected ownership first. And just like, hey, what was their game plan coming in as to how to handle the highest projected owned pitchers, right? This will give you a little bit more of an idea of like what they plan to happen, right? Because nobody knows exactly how ownership is going to come in. But we want to, like, you can compare it to projected just to get a sense of like what their game plan was. So I come in here, sort by projected own. It looks like their plan was to be very flat. Like, hey, I'm going to match on some of the highest projected owned pitchers. These were also the top projected pitchers, and these were all the pitchers over 10K salary. Okay. So like, hey, all the pitchers over 10K, I'm just going to match. I'm not going to try and take any shots. This is like when I talk about like, hey, we don't want these guys to beat us. And we also don't want to have like none of them either, right? We're just going to match. We'll take as many shares as the field gets and find leverage elsewhere. And then it looks like they decided to try and get leverage on Jack Flaherty a little bit more. He was a very good value. And if we sort by value, where does he come in? So he's like top 4 here. He is the highest projected of the top values here. This could also be something good to look at, right? Okay. How did they handle the top value pitchers? Well, it's interesting. The top 4, they actually have positive leverage on all of them. So they're getting a little bit more than the field on all of these spots. So, you know, I've said like I think value matters for pitchers based on their range of outcomes. And it seems like, you know, this person like agrees, right? And seems like the sim ROI agrees as well. So value is a good thing. We go back to projection. I don't think there's like a ton else here. But those are like the big things that I saw that I felt were definitely important for this analysis, right? Okay, last thing, we go to batters. Highest exposed batter, 24%. Highest leverage, 15%. Oh, I'm sorry. Highest leverage is 10%, 10.9, but the batter is 15% owned. So like a 5% owned batter, they're in like 3x the field. You know, that's kind of what we talked about, right? Like being like 2 to 3x the field on like some of your favorite plays. Seems like they like Brian Reynolds. You know, he's like the only Pittsburgh hitter up near the top. McCutcheon's 10%, a little bit lower. And then, you know, some other guys are trickling in lower, but they're all still coming in above their projected ownership. This is probably one of those scenarios where, you know, Pittsburgh 4.4, not 4.3, but again, a lower projected run team. Maybe they were like, hey, let's try and get to some Pittsburgh. It fades. I think there was a chalky pitcher, Joe Ryan. Oh no, it was Woods Richardson. This one, my bad. So yeah, so this is what I would be doing. You know, trying to learn in contest flashback. I think what we saw with like the 5 stacks of the lower projected run team, super interesting. So you could do this for multiple players, right? I probably would. I would do it for multiple players, you know, and then just like go down the list, right? Okay, check out Lunch Money, check out Royal Pain, check out OCDOBV, right? Check out Z-Roth, right? All these guys. All right. A couple questions here. Check out the winner. We can always check out the winner, like that's fine. We've done that like in the past, and you don't always like learn a ton by doing that, but you could, right? If you wanted to add, looks like the winner happened to be a 150 maxer. If you're like, hey, I want to check out, the guys at the top, but I also want to check out the guys that profited, right? Okay. Royal Pain, 18K profit. Go a little bit further down. SK Ski Jim B, I'm guessing. He won, right? Check them out as well. You don't add them to your analysis. So I think it's totally fine to like, hey, I want to look at guys who won. I want to look at guys who ranked well in the Sims and maybe even some guys I know, right? Like those are all good approaches to take here in your analysis. Noah said, can SaberSim handle Showdown Golf? I see round 2 is up on DK. I believe the slate is up, but I'm almost positive round 1 is still in progress, and the sim will not run until round 1 is completely over. And then even if round 1 is over, we do need to take a little bit of time because it isn't until, a little bit after round 1 ends that all of the official odds come out for like the next round and things like that. So it looks like round 1 is still being played. I see guys on like hole 16, hole 15. So sometime after, I'd give it like, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours after round 1 ends, you could probably expect round 2 showdown to be up. So that's most likely the schedule there. All right. Good stuff there. Talked a lot of flashback. I think it was a really good time and place to do so, but we are all caught up with questions. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll have a lot more to talk about tomorrow with MLB being back. So until then, everybody, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.